If you start calisthenics and find yourself stuck with major plateaus on skills like the handstand, planche, front lever, or even the basic pull-ups or dips, then this video right here is for you. So the Jack Vegan, aka Jake, a master calisthenics athlete, content creator, and online coach, accomplished many impressive feats like the front lever pull-up, full planche, and I believe on his way to the one-arm planche, I believe, from his Instagram. So in my opinion, that's mind-blowing. I don't know about y'all, but hey, glad to have you on this platform because you could definitely put a lot of game into not only my audience, but also me too. So, glad to have you here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Yeah, I'm excited to talk a bit more about calisthenics and, find out what the questions are and, just give a bit of information. Yeah, I'm ready.
Yes, sir. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about you. So can you explain what your training background is? Has it been only calisthenics, a little bit of both in terms of weights and calisthenics? Can you just go into detail about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I was always really active. So I started off with fitness when I was little. So I was always a really active kid. I'd be, running around the house, giving my parents mayhem, that kind of thing. But then as I grew up, I started getting more into sports. I started playing football when I was younger. Then into my early teens, I started playing rugby. And that's how I started building like my physique, my body, and like my legs mainly is just from sports, sprinting. I then started to do athletics like pole vault, 100-meter sprints, stuff like that. So a lot of the athleticism and kind of foundation came from there. But then only until I was 17, that's when I started going to the gym and actually started building muscle, because before then I was maybe lean, but not really big built, maybe not strong, but I was fast. So 17, I was like, okay, let's try and get, a bit bigger, put on some mass. So I started with the gym, just the regular gym stuff, like bench, deadlift, squats, the regular things most people are doing in the gym. So no calisthenics at that point. I don't even really think I was hitting pull-ups at that point. So it was only like a couple years into the gym. I want to say maybe like four or 5 years into the gym. That's when I started to get into calisthenics. Pretty much in 2018, that's when I first started with, trying to learn skills. So I already had a basis from the prior stuff I did in the gym. So I already was, decently good at push-ups. Wasn't that great at pull-ups, but, I could do quite a lot of dips. So I started working on my pull-ups in 2018 and all of that. Started working towards the static skills. So I've been doing it for about 5 years now.
That's crazy because me and you pretty much started around the same time too. And I had a similar approach as well, where, I've always been kind of active in terms of like this fitness, playing soccer. So that's kind of how I built like a lot of the physical endurance and then basic strength training from like my soccer foundation, doing plenty of push-ups. I never really did pull-ups or dips up until 2018. So it's been about 5 years, about to be that 5.5, 6 year mark too for me. So it's kind of cool to see how you progress in the same time as me, but we have different feats and like feats of strength as well. So what I wanted to get into now is, what would you say is the hardest skill or feat of strength that you accomplished?
Oh, okay, that's a tough one. The hardest skill. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard because different things are hard in different ways. But I'd say either like something like Maltese, Iron Cross, Dragon Planche or Dragon Maltese. Probably those are up there with the hardest things I can do. Probably one of those.
Okay, Dragon Maltese. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's when you get your parallettes, you bounce on the end of them, and then you have them wide, and you're basically, flying. Your feet are off the floor.
I think I just saw you do that on Instagram. It was like, yeah, with the parallel bars, you're bouncing. That's crazy, bro. That's crazy. I don't think people can even like fathom how hard that is from a balancing perspective to even like a strength component too. So props to you, bro. So speaking of the planche though, what would you say is like the best planche progression? Because I know you're like the planche guru when it comes to like the calisthenic planche space. And you actually put me on a lot of game from your YouTube videos. So shout out to you, man.
So best planche progressions. Yeah. It's mainly going to depend on the person, but of course there are some exercises that are pretty much going to be the best for everyone. So I'm always going to say, they're placed for attempts. So just attempting the planche. That's going to be sort of like your foundation, because if you don't try the thing, you're not going to be able to do it if you never try it. So you need to be attempting that skill you want to get. But then you also need some other exercises to fully understand the muscle activation, because if you just try something, just out the gate, it's going to be hard and it's going to stay hard. So you need some other things to make that attempt easier. So you're going to do your attempts, and then next is probably going to be something, a lot easier. So like assisted planche. So using a resistance band, just adding that, and then you can do that planche progression you're trying to gain with some assistance. So then you can start working on the muscle activation and working on the strength in, an area where you can hold it for a decent amount of time to give your body enough stimulus to actually be like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. I'm starting to understand the movement, and okay, now we need to get stronger. If you're only holding something for, 0.5 of a second, that's too hard to really, start gaining some strength from. So you need to make it easy in some way. So those two you're going to be attempting, when you get close enough in strength to a skill, but then you're going to be using like bands and stuff like that to, do assisted planche.
Bro, there's no way, man. So you were talking about how the progressions that you recommend is like doing attempts to kind of just like test your strength on a particular progression of the planche, and then utilize the resistance bands to help increase volume. So specifically to those two formats, like how can one choose what's the best planche progression for them, and also what's the best bands to utilize in their sessions?
Well, okay, for the first thing, so what progression is going to be right for you? Most likely you're going to start off with the first one, which is going to be, a tuck planche. But you might be, because generally when people start learning planche, they've never really trained a straight arm movement. Everything else in the gym, even most basics, are all bent arms. So your push-ups, your pull-ups, your dips, they're all bent arms. So usually when people start planche, they're usually starting from tuck planche. I don't really know a lot of people that, just started off with like a harder progression, like straddle planche, for example. There probably are people out there, but then they probably already know what to do. So most people are going to start off with tuck planche. That's probably where you're going to start off with, and people progress, can progress quite quickly with that if they've got a good foundation. So you're probably going to be either like tuck planche or advanced tuck planche. That's where I see most people start off working on good form with that. And then your second question, it was what assistance to use or what band?
Right.
Yes. So for what band to use, I'll sort of say, if you're starting off, just start off with a heavy enough band so you understand what your body needs to do. You understand, okay, I know the form, so I know I need to, protract my scapula. I need to have straight arms, all of this stuff. You need to actually be able to do it and understand that. So it's fine enough having it in your head. That's the first step. So you need to have done your research on how to do the move. A lot of people don't do that and will just try it. But you need the information on how to actually activate your muscles and what muscles need to be activated. And then use a heavy enough band so you can just, okay, I've got the activation. I'm starting to understand it. And then once you've understand the activation, then you can do lighter bands where you're working just more on your strength, and your form is not going to be perfect here because you're still learning it. You're still trying to get the strength to where, you can do it with better form. So from there, you're going to do a mix of, a lighter band where you're working on your strength, and then that heavier band, still working on your activation, until you're really good with it and you can start doing your attempts without a band.
So that was like a combination of about like 2 to 3 sessions per week in terms of like specifying your training for the planche, correct?
Yeah. The number of sessions can really depend on like the skill level. It can depend on a number of things, and just like your schedule in general and how much time you want to dedicate to learning this skill. So it really depends, but 3 times a week is a really good place to start.
Good. Yeah, I was just kind of like affirming from my own personal training too, because I typically train it. Say, for example, I have a full skill day dedicated for planche training where I'm like testing my strength, varying the intensity depending on like the block that I'm in. And then I have 2 other sessions where I'm using like the volume based approach with like heavier resistance bands just to kind of get more time and attention, more holds, or if I'm doing like dynamic reps, like for example, going from a advanced tuck to a regular tuck, or if I'm doing negatives. So good to know. Good to know. Leading on to my next question, though, you mentioned scheduling. So, what is your current workout program and split?
For myself,
For
like,
your,
what do I do?
yeah, what do you do? What does Jack Vegan do?
Okay. For me, my training is It differs a lot because basically I make YouTube videos, so I'm also sometimes training for YouTube videos. So that means sometimes I'm not always doing what's sort of optimal. Sometimes I'm doing someone else's program. But let's say that I've made my own program and this is just for my regular training. It's not for a YouTube video. Then I'm training anywhere between 4 times to 3 times a week. So 4 times is when I'm going higher volume. So this is where you want to train a bit more, and it's not as difficult in the sessions for your specific holds. Like you're using a slightly heavier band. So this allows you to, get longer holds, longer sets. So that's more stimulus, and you're gaining more knowledge on how to hold. And, say you're doing, like dynamic reps, like you said, you can do presses and stuff like this for a lot of reps. So you start accumulating that volume. And that's when I'm training like 4 times a week. And then I'll kind of taper down to like 3 times. And that's when I'm training more strength. It's mainly just for recovery. So when things are getting harder, I just reduce the session by 1. To give me more rest in between. And that means I can do, more or better quality sets throughout my workouts. If I kept it at 4, each workout would be a little bit tougher and I wouldn't get as long, or it wouldn't be as good quality hold. So that's really important, is like your rest in between and how like good are your actual sets. So, that's sort of the days I train. And I train push-pull, on the days I train. I have been doing legs as well. For a period, I wasn't doing it as well, just to give me more time to train planche. But yeah, you can train legs as well. That's no problem. It's just, depends on your schedule and how much time you want to dedicate to different stuff.
Yeah, and I think the stigma between calisthenic athletes not training legs is a touchy subject, but I think mainly for those who specialize in like static skills or freestyle calisthenics, for example, like there's going to get to a point where leg training does become more of a hindrance in terms of training volume. So I think for most people, you can train legs if you try and specify in like your calisthenic niche, whether it's like strictly statics or weighted calisthenics or freestyling, then that's where you got to become, you know, manage your priorities a little bit more. So I personally still train legs twice a week, like a bodybuilder per se. But at the end of the day, I'm still focusing on that calisthenic foundation. So it does differ to most people. So calisthenic people do train legs. It just depends on the stage that you're at of your journey. So
yeah, and I'll just add to that a lot of people will say, oh yeah, don't train legs, it'll make your skills worse. In my opinion, that's not really true, because number one, I'd say, planche, the aim is to get to full planche, and full planche and straddle, to the hardest progressions, they're, heavy on the glutes, they're heavy on the legs. You need to have good leg activation. So if you have weak glutes, you're probably likely going to have, bad form in your planche. So you want to be training those muscles anyway. Secondly, you're probably training strength, so you're not even probably building, so much muscle on your legs. Like who's packing on, like 10 pounds on their legs each year, doing like 1 or 2 sessions, like a week. It's difficult to pack on that much muscle where it will affect your skills. So the only big downside is your time. It is, if you do a leg session, that's time you could have been doing a push or pull session. That's the only sort of downside. It's not really that it's going to make your skills worse. It's just time dedication. So it's up to the person to decide. But I don't think if you train legs, your skills are going to get worse automatically. I disagree with that.
if I can add on to that too, so the way I like to approach my skill training from like even the get go when I first started calisthenics was I always did some skill movement at the beginning of my sessions, whether it's upper body day or a lower body day. So if you do want to prioritize, like that optimal way of training to build your body, then I actually recommend training your skills at the beginning of your sessions, especially in your legs. So for example, with me, I use a upper lower split in addition to a fit day for skills and accessories. So I train like the planche front lever at the beginning of my upper day. And then also I utilize 2 of my lower body days for like those volume based holds or dynamic reps with my planche and front levers. So you just got to be kind of smart and tweak your programming specific to your goals and understand like what's optimal in different scenarios and kind of just like play around with the pieces.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. And that's exactly what I did when I first was getting into calisthenics, and all the way up until I learned straddle planche, I was doing legs, once to twice a week, 100%. So yeah, I would do the same, just do the skills at the start of the session.
Cool. Yeah, so let's go into some of the Q&As that I got from my subscribers. Nothing too difficult, I hope. So Marcos Corona 4621 said, "What is the ideal rep range for compound and isolation exercises? Should I aim to do more sets for compounds or isolations?" So for the first question, what's the most ideal rep range for compounds and isos?
So for compound movement, so is this strictly calisthenics?
This is a very general question, so I'm gonna assume the entire umbrella of training. So let's try to
Yeah.
tackle maybe calisthenics
Yeah.
and weights.
Yeah. In general, is a really general question. It's just compound movement. So it really depends on what your goal is. If your goal is strength or hypertrophy or endurance or explosiveness, that is really going to define what rep range you're in. It's not
Facts.
really so like say you're squatting but you want to build for strength, you're going to go lower rep range. If you're hypertrophy, maybe slightly mid 8 to 10. Explosiveness, it depends more on your technique and how many reps you can do at a certain weight. You can do it in different ways. So for a very general question like that, it's going to be dependent on what your specific goal is, like hypertrophy, explosiveness, endurance, etc.
Right, right. To add on to that, I would say more than most people train compounds within the 3 to 15 rep ranges because that's where you get the most bang for your buck for a compound movement. So whether you want to train for strength or hypertrophy, I do recommend you to stay within that 3 to 15 rep ranges. If you're doing isolations, then you have the leeway to kind of train with the higher rep ranges because it's an isolated muscle group. So there's going to be less leeway to utilize other muscles to kind of like move that weight. So you're forced to utilize lower weight in a sense, and you don't want to get yourself injured. So I actually recommend you to do a minimum of like about 8 reps up to like 15 or a little above, all depending on like, of course, your goals and experience as well. So that's my take on it. In terms of whether or not you should do more sets for compounds or isolations, I'm following the rule of like all you need to do really, if you want to do specifically for building muscle, you just need 2 sets, right? So you don't need that much volume in terms of building muscle. Utilizing a lower volume, high intensity approach is something that a lot of people utilize nowadays, especially with like the trend of I believe his name is Mike Mincer. He's like a bodybuilder, OG guy. But I noticed like even with me, I like start to realize I didn't need that much volume compared to what people would spout out like years ago, like 4 or 5 sets and plus. So 2 sets is ideal for compounds. In terms of isolations, you're good to do up to 3 sets. I never did 4 sets for like a bicep curl or like a tricep extension. I think that's just overkill. So yeah, that's my take on that. Let's see. Next question. So Randy said, "Can you give me a more accurate example of the difference between high and moderate intensity? High intensity meaning every set to muscle failure, and moderate intensity meaning dot dot dot."
Yeah. Okay. So for high intensity, I'm gonna kind of zone in on calisthenics. So for me, high intensity is going to be just more body weight or harder progression. That's usually kind of how I define it as, because in calisthenics it's way more vague. So instead of it being load or weight, I'm thinking like, okay, how much of my body weight? Maybe it's like a percentage. So say you're using a band and the band is helping or assisting with 50% of your body weight. Approximately is very approximate, but you can have ways of calculating it. But very approximately, if you know the assistance of your band and it's taking away half your body weight, then okay, like this set is going to be out. If you were making the intensity out of 10, it's going to be a 5 out of 10. So I'm going to be working anywhere from like a 7 to 10 out of 10 when I'm working on sort of strength. And for all these skills is strength.
So yeah, I kind of agree to what you were saying as well in terms of like the calisthenic lens. I believe like training for a high intensity approach, you want to choose a harder progression, harder exercise variant. And then what I like to do for like a moderate intensity is essentially regress to exercise progression. So let's say, for example, my high intensity overhead press can be like freestanding handstand push-ups, right? I can only do about 5 reps consistently on a set. So that's high intensity. And then my moderate intensity would be a regression of the handstand push-up without the wall. So that could be, you know, chest to wall handstand push-ups on the wall, or it can be elevator pike push-ups. So in a sense, it just means choosing a harder exercise for a higher intensity and then choosing a easier exercise, quote unquote, for that moderate intensity. But the difference is you're still training to failure on both sessions, right? Specifically to the calisthenic lens. Now, people can get a little bit more specified with like whether you're doing weighted calisthenics, you can choose, for example, weighted pull-ups, you do heavy loads, and then you start doing moderate loads. So those can be taken to a different extent in terms of like, training to failure. You can, utilize uh failure in terms of like your back down sets, and then utilize failure for your other back down sets on both sessions. So it kind of just depends on what you're training specifically. So it's very hard to give a very specific answer to a more general question. So hopefully I gave some kind of better context to that. But so far, so good, man. I think you definitely gave a lot of game. I really do appreciate your time for hopping on this call, providing your knowledge and context specifically to calisthenics and how, we can elevate our own journey. Because I definitely do watch your content. If you don't know who Jack the Vegan is, definitely watch his content because he is an expert when it comes to these advanced level exercises like the planche, the front levers, and just a bucket of knowledge pretty much. So thank you very much, man.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. And yeah, if there's any other questions, you guys know where to go. You can find me online and send me a DM. And yeah, I'm available. So yeah, be glad to help you guys out.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And, hopefully, maybe one of these days I can go out because I know you stay in the UK, right?
Yeah, I'm in the UK. Yeah.
Yeah, I know nowadays I'm starting to know a lot of people staying out there. So I might have to book a trip over there and start doing some collabs in person, man.
Really? Yeah, there's quite a few people now doing either making content or just in calisthenics. It's like really blowing up here. So
yeah,
it's a good place to go. And everyone's pretty much in one place as well. So you don't have to like travel everywhere. Everyone's pretty much in one place. That does calisthenics. So yeah, it's a good place to go.
Cobra Trains, he's up next. Make sure y'all subscribe to him. He's number one out here.
He's the toughest fitness guy out here.